Welcome back to the briefing. If you've been watching the mainstream networks over the last 24 hours, you are being spoon-fed a dangerously sanitized version of reality. They are telling you about a skirmish. They are calling it a naval incident. Let me be unequivocally clear. What just happened in the Strait of Hormuz is not an incident. It is the deliberate, calculated detonation of the US-Iran truce, and it is going to hit your wallet, your security, and the global economy with the force of a freight train. Let's pull back the curtain and look at the geopolitical chessboard. For the past 39 days, Washington and Tehran have been engaged in a shadow dance. The public narrative was that peace talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, were progressing. The reality, it was a smokescreen. The Islamabad negotiations were never about finding a middle ground. They were a stalling tactic while both sides moved their ultimate apocalyptic chess pieces into position. Think about the 6-hour standoff with the Iranian shadow fleet vessel, the Toskra. The mainstream media is painting this as routine maritime enforcement. Ask yourself, since when does the United States Navy, the most lethal maritime force in human history, spend 6 hours politely asking a rusty, sanctioned oil smuggler to turn around? They don't. That 6-hour window wasn't about patience. It was a high-stakes geopolitical staring contest. Washington was giving Tehran exactly 6 hours to pick up the red phone and capitulate. When the Iranian ship killed its communication arrays and pushed forward, it wasn't just a rogue captain making a bad call. That was a direct, localized order from the URG. It was Tehran telling the Pentagon, "We are calling your bluff." And the Pentagon's response? They ripped a hole in the hull and boarded the ship. But the real story isn't the boarding of one ship. The real story is the immediate economic shockwave that followed. Within minutes, global oil prices surged by 6%, crossing the $95 per barrel threshold. Now let's talk about what this means for you, the Western consumer, because this is where the geopolitical meets the personal. The Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank have been desperately trying to engineer a soft landing for the economy. They've been fighting inflation tooth and nail, a sustained spike in Brent crude above $100 a barrel, which is exactly where we are heading if this escalates, vaporizes that soft landing. It means the cost of manufacturing, the cost of shipping, the cost of the food on your table, and the gas in your car is about to skyrocket. This isn't just a Middle Eastern conflict. This is an economic tax levied directly on the Western middle class. The markets are panicking because they realize the Strait of Hormuz, the artery that pumps 20% of the world's oil, is no longer secure. But why is the strait so vulnerable? Why can't the mighty U.S. Navy simply secure a 21-mile-wide choke point? To understand that, you have to understand the terrifying reality of asymmetric warfare that the Pentagon is desperately trying to keep out of the headlines. Let's talk about the tactical nightmare that is keeping us Central Command awake at night, the URG's Mosquito Fleet. When Donald Trump boldly declared that the Iranian Navy had been destroyed, he was telling a half-truth. The conventional Iranian Navy, the big slow frigates and destroyers, are target practice for us carrier strike groups. But the URG doesn't fight conventionally. Since 1986, they have been building a parallel, decentralized naval force designed specifically to bleed a superpower dry. Here is what the briefings won't show you. The Strait of Hormuz is flanked by 10 heavily fortified, militarized islands. Beneath these islands is a labyrinth of subterranean tunnels and underground submarine pens. Hidden inside these fortified bunkers are thousands of hyper-fast, heavily armed drone boats and missile-equipped skiffs. This is the Mosquito Fleet. They don't dock in plain sight for us satellites to track. They launch from inside the mountains, strike their targets in swarm formations, and vanish back into the earth before us air support can even lock onto them. This is exactly why the 39-day bombing campaign failed to open the strait. You cannot bomb what you cannot see, and you cannot deter fanatical proxy forces with million-dollar smart bombs when they are using $5,000 disposable drones. It is a terrifying asymmetry of cost and lethality. The Houthi rebels in Yemen have been using a crude version of this exact same playbook in the Red Sea, and it has successfully paralyzed global shipping. The URG's version is infinitely more sophisticated, better armed, and positioned at the world's most critical energy choke point. And this brings us to the ultimate escalation, the Trump ultimatum. We now have confirmation from back-channel sources that Donald Trump's fair deal presented to Iran is nothing short of a total surrender document. Halt uranium enrichment for 15 years. Ship all stockpiles out of the country. Dismantle the ballistic missile program. Defund the proxy militias. In exchange, the U.S. releases $27 billion in frozen assets. To the Western mind, this sounds like diplomacy. To the hardliners in Tehran, it is a demand for national suicide. Trump's message to Tehran, delivered via these back channels, was chillingly simple. Sign it, or I will blow you up. He isn't talking about strategic strikes on military targets. He is threatening the total, systemic annihilation of Iran's bridges, power grids, water facilities, and infrastructure. He is threatening to send the country back to the Stone Age. To back this up, Washington is currently executing one of the largest naval massings of the 21st century. The USS Gerald R. the USS George Washington, and the USS Abraham Lincoln are converging on the theater. 3 nuclear-powered floating cities, accompanied by guided missile destroyers, Virginia-class attack submarines, and enough firepower to level a continent. The Pentagon is hiding their exact coordinates, moving them in a shell game across the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. We are no longer looking at a localized skirmish. We are looking at 2 immovable forces on a direct, high-speed collision course. Iran is betting that the U.S. public has no stomach for another trillion-dollar Middle Eastern quagmire. They are betting that spiking oil prices will force the West to back down. The United States, conversely, is betting that the threat of absolute, overwhelming destruction will force Tehran to blink. But out here in the real world, past the rhetoric and the posturing, the safety on the weapon has already been clicked off. The shadow war is over. The real war is about to begin.